It's fascinating, isn't it? We live in a time of incredible scientific progress, groundbreaking discoveries left and right, but then there are these certain scientific ideas that people just seem resistant to.
Yeah, it's like this weird paradox, right?
Exactly. And that's what we're diving into today, evophobia. And no, before you picture someone running from a T-Rex, we need to clarify this isn't about fear of dinosaurs or evolution in general.
Right. It's a bit more nuanced than that.
Precisely. It's more about resisting the idea of using evolutionary thinking to understand human behavior. It's like this pushback against applying evolutionary biology, especially evolutionary psychology, to ourselves, to why we do the things we do.
It's interesting, you see it pop up in a lot of discussions these days.
Is this resistance just about the science itself? Or is there something more there, something about our cultural and political climates feeding into it? What's at stake is huge. It's about how we understand ourselves in this world where nature and nurture are constantly interacting.
It's that classic debate taken to a whole new level.
Yeah. So let's unpack this. What exactly are we talking about when we say evophobia?
So it's not about being afraid as evolution, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's not about denying that humans evolved from earlier ancestors. It's more about this discomfort, I guess you could say, with the idea that evolutionary biology, and specifically evolutionary psychology, can actually explain why we behave the way we do. It's almost like this fear of oversimplification.
It's like people are afraid of being reduced to their biology, reduced to just their genes.
There's definitely that element to it. And this resistance seems especially strong when you start talking about things like, oh, I don't know, gender dynamics or how different social groups behave. Those areas where cultural explanations are traditionally dominant.
Yeah, where the go-to explanation is often about societal norms or upbringing.
Right. And so when you bring in evolutionary biology, well, sometimes people feel like it's kind of a threat to those existing explanations.
Like it's challenging their worldview, their understanding of how the world works.
In a way, yes. The excerpt really highlights how often we see this kind of prioritization of cultural explanations over biological ones. It's like people are more comfortable with those, even if evolutionary biology might offer valuable insights.
Right, and this kind of leads into the first major cause of evophobia outlined in the paper, our cultural and social beliefs.
It makes sense when you think about it. We all grow up with a certain set of beliefs, right? About how the world works, about what influences our behavior.
Our families, our societies, they shape our understanding of things.
Exactly. So if you grow up believing that we're primarily shaped by our environment, by our upbringing, it can be really jarring to then consider biological factors. It can feel like it's undermining that worldview.
It's like a tug of war between those two forces.
In a way, it is. It's that age-old nature versus nurture debate, just, well, reignited with new fervor in light of these advancements in evolutionary biology.
It's almost like a new lens through which we're viewing that debate. And this ties into another major cause of evophobia discussed in the source material, a misunderstanding, a misinterpretation of evolutionary science. It's not as simple as biology is destiny, is it?
Oh, absolutely not. That's one of the biggest misconceptions out there. Evolutionary science is incredibly nuanced, and it absolutely does not say that we're just puppets controlled by our genes.
Thank goodness for that.
Right. The idea that evolution somehow negates free will or the immense impact of social factors, that's just not accurate. It's about understanding how our biology interacts with our environment, how those two forces work together to shape who we are.
It's more about predispositions, tendencies, than it is about hardwiring, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's about recognizing that we have these biological underpinnings, but how those actually manifest, that's influenced by a whole host of environmental and social factors. We're not robots.
Okay, so we've got these cultural beliefs, we've got misunderstandings about the science, but the source material also points to something else influencing evophobia: political and ideological viewpoints. This one always seems a bit trickier to navigate.
Yeah, no doubt. This is where things get really complex because you're dealing with deeply held beliefs about how society should be structured, about right and wrong, about what it means to be human.
Where those lines should be drawn and where they shouldn't be.
Exactly. And so certain ideologies might be more, shall we say, resistant to evolutionary explanations if those explanations seem to challenge some of their core assumptions. It's not necessarily the science itself, but the potential implications of that science.
The lens through which it's being viewed and how it might be used, even if that's not the intent of the science itself.
Right. For instance, if evolutionary biology suggests that certain behaviors have a biological basis, some people might worry that this could be used to justify those behaviors, which might be at odds with their vision for a more just or equitable society.
It's almost like this fear that acknowledging any biological influence might somehow undermine the push for social change, for progress.
It's a very real concern and one that we need to be sensitive to.
Absolutely. We can't just shy away from these conversations because they're difficult or uncomfortable, but knowing these potential pitfalls, it begs the question, what are the real-world implications of this resistance to evolutionary thinking? What's actually at stake here?
Well, when we avoid engaging with potentially controversial areas of research, it can have a chilling effect on scientific progress, on our understanding of ourselves.
Like, are we self-censoring in a way that could be detrimental in the long run?
That's the worry. The source actually mentioned a study, I believe it was on the evolutionary basis of risk-taking behavior, where the researchers faced significant difficulty securing funding.
Really?
Yeah, there was this concern, you see, that the findings, if they show differences between, say, men and women in terms of risk-taking, that those findings might be used to reinforce gender stereotypes.
Even if that wasn't the intent of the research itself.
Right, and this really highlights how this fear, this evophobia, can stifle scientific exploration, limit our understanding of human behavior, and it goes beyond research, too.
Absolutely. The paper also talks about the implications for education, and this one really hit home for me. Imagine you're a teacher trying to explain evolution, explain the complexities of evolutionary psychology, but some parents, they hold these very strong evophobic views. How do you navigate that as an educator?
It's incredibly challenging. On the one hand, you have this responsibility to teach science accurately, to equip students with knowledge. But then you also have to be sensitive to the concerns of parents, to the cultural climate of the community you're teaching in.
It's a tightrope walk for sure. And then this spills over into our broader societal discussions, which is, I think, where the rubber really meets the road here.
It's about how we approach these complex issues facing our society, right?
Right. We can't have these meaningful conversations about things like, oh, I don't know, gender equality, about how we approach education, how we think about criminal justice reform, any of it, if we're not willing to consider all the factors at play.
It's about having a complete understanding of the issue, and that includes understanding the biological influences, the evolutionary history that might be contributing to some of these issues. We can't just ignore those.
Ignoring a piece of the puzzle doesn't make the puzzle any easier to solve, right?
Well said. It's about being able to have those difficult conversations, but from a place of understanding, acknowledging both the biological and cultural influences that are shaping these dynamics.
It's about recognizing that it's not an either-or situation, but rather a both-and. So how do we bridge these divides? How do we move forward in a way that acknowledges these concerns, but doesn't allow fear to stifle progress?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The source material proposes a three-pronged approach: education, collaboration, and open dialogue.
Sounds like a good starting point.
Right. First and foremost, we need accessible education, outreach initiatives that can accurately explain evolutionary science and address these common misconceptions that are fueling evophobia.
Demystifying the science, showing that it's not about reducing us to just our biology, but understanding the interplay of so many factors.
Precisely. And we need more collaboration, more interdisciplinary work that brings together experts from evolutionary biology, psychology, sociology, anthropology. Imagine the insights we could gain by combining those perspectives.
Having those different disciplines in conversation with each other, it's like that saying, two heads are better than one. But in this case, it's like 5 or 6 disciplines are better than one.
Exactly. And finally, but certainly not least, we need open and respectful dialogue. We need spaces where people with different viewpoints, even those with strong evophobic concerns, can come to the table, engage with the science, engage with each other.
Creating that space for constructive disagreement where everyone feels heard and respected, even if they don't agree on everything.
Right. It's about fostering that intellectual humility, that willingness to say, I might not have all the answers, or I'm open to considering a different perspective.
It's interesting, thinking about all of this deep dive into evophobia, it makes me wonder about how we navigate those areas where scientific advancement bumps up against our existing worldviews, because it's going to keep happening, right? As we learn more about genetics, about neuroscience, those debates about nature and nurture, they're only going to get more complex, more nuanced.
Absolutely. And it's up to us to approach those conversations with curiosity, with open minds, with a commitment to understanding even those perspectives we might not initially agree with.
It's a journey we're all on together, figuring out what it means to be human in this constantly evolving world of ours.